My name's Tom Jennings and this is the 24 Frames cast. So I've been preparing a regular episode which, during a fit of stupidity, I managed to completely remove from the desktop on my computer, and thinking I had a backup of said file, I was, much to my annoyance, found that I didn't have one, and I've basically had to re-record that episode again. And I was still conscious of the fact that I do want to keep to releasing at least one episode a week, so I thought whilst I was putting things back together, it would provide me with an opportunity to talk about something else. So this is going to be a short bonus episode, because it hasn't escaped my attention that there is a lot going on around Marilyn Monroe at the moment. This would have been the 100th year of her life had she been alive, and I was going to pick a film of hers that I was quite keen on, which is probably not one of the most popular Monroe films. And I thought, because everyone always assumes, I think when we talk about Marilyn Monroe, you always go to that kind of like Some Like It Hot and whatnot. And I just thought I'd pick something a little bit different. Before I get to that, Monroe is a kind of a fascinating character in the history of Hollywood. She is one of the most Hollywood of Hollywood stories. A beautiful woman who had a salacious private life that gave fuel to the tabloids, as well as appearing in some of the most popular films of the ages. Her debut, which I haven't seen, is the Dangerous Years. That was followed by the Asphalt Jungle, a film that I really love. The classic All About Eve. There's a few in between there I haven't seen. But one of my favourite films of hers certainly has to be How to Marry a Millionaire, which I watched relatively recently. It was last year, I believe, when I was doing a bit of a trawl through the early years of CinemaScope, which is a subject I will be talking about in my when I talk about the film that I'm going to be discussing about Monroe's today. But she was always more than a dizzy blonde. I think that's fair to say, and when you watch her films, you can't be stupid and have comedic timing like that. And as well as screen presence, she knew, obviously directors knew how to film her, but she also knew how to be filmed. I think she was someone who understood her appeal and unashamedly flaunted her beauty. And the result, of course, is a body of work that I think will be discovered, discussed, and written about for the rest of cinema history. I think she plays that much an important part in it. My favourite film of hers is probably The Misfits, which would have been her last film. I saw that at university and actually had the joy of seeing it projected, and it really did leave quite a long-lasting impression on me. And the fact it was the last films of both Monroe and Clark Gable gives it an added poignancy. And also, I've always believed that film is part of the slow transferring from the studio system to the modern Hollywood. I don't believe that kind of Hollywood changed simply on New Year's Eve 1969. I believe it was a process that started way before that. But that film, I think, is part of that cycle. However, there is one film which is something of an anomaly for me in the Marilyn Monroe filmography. And I have to be honest with you, I have never once watched Some Like It Hot and actually enjoyed that film. And I know to many this might sound like a form of sacrilege, but I simply don't like it. I have got no interest in it whatsoever. And what I often find with films like that is I will try and watch them on repeat to try and make that breakthrough, and it's never happened to me before. And when I see it on kind of various best of lists, I simply don't get it. It's one of those films, it's one of those kind of, I suppose, legacy films that you're supposed to love. Or at least appreciate, not necessarily love, but appreciate. And I can't do it. I just don't know what all the fuss is about, and which is something of a strange one, because it is genuinely considered to be, I suppose, the most Monroe film ever. And I might one day have that experience where I watch it and I suddenly get what all the fuss is about, and I find my way into it. But Yeah, I've always struggled with Some Like It Hot, so please don't hold that against me, as I know someone who does. But the film I'm going to be talking about today, it's probably not the best film in her filmography, but it's certainly one of the ones that I've enjoyed the most over the years, primarily because I do think it's one of the best early CinemaScope films. And I don't just mean widescreen films, I mean CinemaScope. It is a style of filmmaking, it's a technological development that really does have its own aesthetic. And being a huge fan of westerns and the director Otto Preminger, the one I'm going to be talking about today is River of No Return. Now, this was Otto Premier's only western, and more's the pity, I guess, because I think it is actually a really interesting film. Not to say it isn't without its controversies, which I will get to in due course. Now, despite being a western, it was actually filmed in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and it's set in northwestern America in 1975, and it is about a widower called Matt Corden, played by Robert Mitchum, who has been released from prison for killing a man while defending another. And it's okay, he shot the man in the back, which as we know by Western law means that's absolutely fine, and as he's not an outlaw, he's obviously the good guy, and it is something of a miscarriage of justice. And he is travelling to a soon-to-be western town that at the moment is really a kind of collection of tents and rather seedy looking bars to pick up his son Mark, who is being cared for by a singer called Kay, played by Marilyn Monroe. Matt's plan is to head out in the wilderness with his son, start a farm and live off the land, whilst Kay and her gambler soon-to-be husband are going to set off to a gold prospect that he has swindled from someone in a game of cards. Whilst tilling the land, Matt suddenly becomes aware that the Native American Indians are nearby and are eagerly eyeing his farm, but were reluctant to attack because it is clear that he is armed. Meanwhile, Kay and her gambler boyfriend suddenly appear on a raft coming down the river, to which Matt saves them and brings them in. Of course, the swindler double crosses them all and makes off with the promise that he will come back for Kay once he has discovered where his gold prospect is. In the meantime, however, now unarmed, the Indians see their chance and begin to pursue Matt, Mark and Kay, who make their escape down the River of No Return. I think it's worth saying of River of No Return, and that this is a completely fair criticism, is there isn't a whole heap of depth to it. Indeed, it feels more like a exercise in simply sitting back and enjoying the view, both literally and figuratively. Although I think Robert Mitchum got top billing as Matt, this is certainly a film in which Monroe is the star. She has, although she isn't in it as much as Mitchum, it is certainly about highlighting her talents and, let's be perfectly honest, her looks. There are various musical numbers throughout the film which really don't need to be in it at all, and during these scenes you will see basically a room full of men gawping at her. And now through retrospect we look at those scenes and she's always kind of been this victim of male gaze and male sexual desire in its most toxic form. We know that she was someone who was exploited sexually by various individuals throughout her life, and with that in mind, there is a kind of uncomfortable aspect to those scenes. It is a showcase for her, and looking at her, there's a star quality and a magnetism to her. Let's be completely honest. She had a body shape which now you just don't see female stars having, and it is incredibly hypersexualized. But what I enjoy about this character and her performance is she's not playing the ditzy blonde. She is quite assertive. She does take control, and in that regard I think it's probably one of the more progressive characters that she did play. Mitchum, of course, is his usual effortless self, possibly not the greatest father on planet Earth. It's hard to infatuate. He's basically just arranged for his son to be dumped at this camp whilst he finds him, and even Kay kind of says to him, what kind of a father are you? Which is probably something I guess most people watching the film are also thinking. And it goes without saying that the child in this film, playing Mark, Tommy Rettig, is teeth-clenchingly annoying. He's got a most piercing voice. He reminds me of the kid in Shane, in fact, where you're just like, oh, shut up. You half want him to cop one from an Indian's arrow. But I guess key to this film is that it's not really asking a whole lot of its lead actors. It's not a deep film. There's not layers of depth to the action. Indeed, it is a very fairly simple story. But I wonder as well if it was a very deliberate choice for Monroe, because it does feel like a transitional film. This isn't the sparkly comedy Marilyn. There is someone a little bit sadder, a bit tougher, and a little bit more ambiguous going on. And apparently, I'm surprised to this actually, but apparently she hated the film, and her and Premier did clash quite a lot. Yet, a lot of modern critics think that her performance in this is quite underrated because it is a lot quieter and less cartoonish. And I wonder if it kind of hints at the more dramatic actress that Monroe wanted to become. But for me, the star of the film is CinemaScope and the locations, because the westerns were perfect for CinemaScope. Indeed, I'm not sure what it seems like the perfect marriage of film and technology. Because I've been to a lot of the kind of the seminal Western locations for real in my life, and I'm not even sure CinemaScope or 70mm does, not even IMAX could probably do them justice, and they were perfect for the format. And a lot of directors struggled with CinemaScope when they first used it, and this was the first time Otto Premiere had made a film in the format. And there is one shot in particular that is, you only kind of realise the genius of it as it's finished, which is Matt is teaching Mark how to shoot, and it's a fairly playful scene. The boy is learning the importance of how to hold the rifle correctly, and there's so much you can read into the rifle and its place in Western culture and mythology. It was the weapon that allowed the expansion of the West to occur. It's synonymous, I guess, with conquest, but also it is a leveler, because there's so many films when kind of the American Native Americans get hold of these weapons, and it kind of levels the playing field. And its importance in Western mythology is, I don't think it can't really be topped. And indeed, there's films about just firearms, Winchester 73 or whatever it's called. And in this one shot, I think he actually distills the rifle's relationship with character and frontier survival, because very slowly the camera begins to track along the rifle and then turns to the horizon, revealing a mountain, and on top of that mountain we see that they are being watched by Native American Indians, and the rifle is the leveler. They will not attack because he has one, and with this rifle he will be able to expand his homestead and settle in the West, and without it he is vulnerable. And that shot does so much to convey so many different themes and aspects of Western mythology. It's absolutely brilliant, but you could only do it with a CinemaScope frame. And I when I was doing this kind of binge last year of CinemaScope, those early ones sometimes, especially in the Robe, the static compositions You can tell that the directors, and a lot of it was caused by the warping that you would get at the edge of the frames, and Premier doesn't seem to bother with that. He understands, it seems, right from the off that, well, not understand, but he knew, it seems, how to instinctively compose for widescreen surprisingly quickly. And I don't think it's unfair a criticism to say that this film was produced by Fox, and I think it is. They're using CinemaScope to show off the format, because it is fair to say that the film was shot largely in Banff National Park, Jasper National Park and Lake Louise, and Fox wanted big screen spectacle, and you really do get this with this film. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at, and for me, sometimes perhaps the landscape is more memorable than the plot. There is one scene, however, that I do think mars the film somewhat, which is there's no easy way of getting around it. There is an attempted rape scene in which Robert Mitchum essentially tries to force himself on the Marilyn Monroe character, and firstly, it seems completely out of place for the character. It does feel somewhat gratuitous, and it really tonally took me out of the film. And I'm not someone who's kind of gets strung up on sort of modern sensibilities and, you know, going back in films saying, well, you know, there's outdated concept. This is straight up an attempted rape, and I think it does somewhat leave an asterisk over the film, especially at the end as well, where effectively Kay is back in a saloon singing, and Matt just walks in, grabs her, chucks her on a wagon, and off they go. There is a sense that I think it's a bit of a betrayal of the Kay character. She isn't someone. I don't think she is the type of person who would take that type of behaviour. But the film demands that it happens anyway. Perhaps this was considered to be romantic at the time, but it certainly wasn't for me. And as I said, it did leave a somewhat bitter taste when I sort of come the film's ending. But overall, I do really enjoy this film. I think it is beautifully shot and directed, and as I said before, I think it is definitely more spectacle based than it is really the plot, which is, I guess, fairly pedestrian. I do own it on Blu-ray. Fox put out a version of it, and it looks absolutely stunning. It's a magnificent transfer, and I would really like to see this projected one day. I'm not sure if it ever gets any kind of re-releases anywhere, if any prints are doing the rounds on the festival circuit, but I can definitely recommend it if you want to kind of branch away from the normal canon Marilyn Monroe fans. So that is going to be it for this episode of the 24 Frames cast. I have got a few personal issues going at the moment. I was talking about the delay on the episodes, which might mean I have to do bonus episodes just for a little bit longer whilst in between kind of sorting a few things out, but we'll see anyway. I'm going to play it by ear. So many thanks for listening, and I'll be in contact soon. Bye.